make sure you watch the whole video before you comment, or else you might end up looking real stupid. I do spend a fair bit of time shitting on this show, but keep in mind, I'm also going to suck its dick. You know what? I think I'm a bit weird. Because when I go on Mal, people don't rewatch things anywhere near as much as I do. I'll rewatch an anime like 4 or 5 times. And when I was going through my backlog, I noticed this one, and I've just got some stuff to say about it now that I'm a bit older and wiser. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to keep a running list of the stuff I don't like, and then I'm going to go over the stuff that I do like. And I'm just going to do it using this PowerPoint slide right here. So let's go. Expositional dialogue is when characters spout things that are relevant to the narrative. It can be done well or it can be done poorly. It's generally considered to be lazy writing when done in a way that it's obvious that it's just for the audience and can break immersion.
The Azusa Yumibo, a ceremonial item used in Shinto.
How magnificent. Your magical library contains a wealth of knowledge, including my cultural background.
Hey, Index, is that you?
The level of power is only great enough to shock the mind or to rectify any imbalances. However, with the proper preparations, it can be used to read the contents of another's mind.
Yes, I'm evil. So evil that now I have you in my clutches, I can tell you my entire plan, because there is no chance you will ever escape. And I am by no means saying this because the audience needs to know how all of this works.
Yeah, so it's pretty bad, and it happens a lot in this show, particularly when the villains give away all their plans, but that's not to say it happens elsewhere. So one situation where it was particularly offensive was when Misaki Unit 10032 was carrying the dead body in the alleyway, and she asked for a password, and she says she can't give away any information, and then suddenly all the other Misaki units show up and readily give away all the information to Toma. It's just like, what was the point of the password? So essentially they're just spouting things to move the plot along or to make sure that the viewer knows what's going on, and there's no in-universe reason or logic to show as to why they are saying these things. Alright, so let's throw that on the list. There's different levels of believability when it comes to how characters act and interact with different things. Anything ranging from realistic to barely plausible. I'd call this case plausible for the most part. It's classic shonen, where the motivations seem to be contrived to some extent to allow for different fighting matchups to happen.
I've detested science ever since it killed my younger brother. It happened one day when we were at an amusement park. There was a glitch in one of the attractions. Riding it had no risks. It was scientifically proven to be sound. It had multiple layers of safeguards. At the hospital, it was just one screw-up after another. They only had enough blood to do one transfusion. And do you know what my little brother did? He told the doctor, please save my sister. Don't you see? That's how much I hate science. I'm willing to do anything to bring its practitioners to their knees.
So you're telling me that Vento of the Front hates science because her and her brother were involved in an amusement park accident. Her brother then chose to give her a blood transfusion as a last-ditch effort to save her, resulting in his death. And we're supposed to buy into the fact that Vento is blaming something as nebulous as science, as a general concept for that matter, as the sole factor for the entire incident. And as a result, she wants to destroy Academy City in its entirety for being built on the foundations of science. At no point did Vento consider what her brother would have wanted. At no point did she consider what he would have thought of her actions. At no point did she take any other factors into account, like the competency of the doctors or the safety protocols of the amusement park ride. Now don't get me wrong, it's plausible she may not have thought about any of these things, but I think it's a bit of a stretch. What do you think about this? And what about the motivations of some of the other characters? Let me know in the comments. Let's face it, a good amount of anime is about power fantasies. As such, a common trope is to have the main character have some sort of overpowered ability that can beat anyone. In this case, Toma has the power to cancel any magic or Esper ability thrown at him. Knowing this, isn't it possible that this can just act as a plot device that can solve a large range of problems at the end of the day? just touch it with his right hand. In a sense, this lowers the stakes of the story and offers a degree of plot armour as Toma has a get out of jail free card for many dangerous situations. So what's a character arc? Well, a character arc is when a character changes throughout the course of the story, and it's normally a change that's emotional or mental of some sort. For example, you have Luke Skywalker in Star Wars, who goes from being a naive farm boy to a seasoned Jedi warrior. Or if you'd like an anime example, you've got Simon from Gurren Lagann, who learns that he needs to carve his own path and step up to become the leader that everyone needs him to be, in order to save the entire universe. Just as with expositional dialogue, a flat character arc can be done well or poorly. The steadfast character will often strengthen their resolve or discover more about their powers. The thing about this show is that Toma is the exact same guy at the start as what he is at the end. There is no arc. He doesn't undertake any sort of emotional or mental journey. He doesn't have any revelations, and he doesn't learn any valuable lessons along the way. Now, before I shit on it any further, I'll just point out that they do hang a lantern on this.
I've made a decision.
You're sure?
Yes. Very sure. It's final. I'm going to learn another language. I mean, I've tried to pick one up before, but you know how it...
Plot holes are when narrative elements either conflict, don't follow a believable chain of cause and effect, or they just plain don't make any sense. One example of a plot hole that stood out to me was when Accelerator just let Hound Dog modify his collar, only for them to tell him later that they're the only ones who can supply the batteries now. This is straight up entrapment, and it's not the first time Accelerator has been a victim of such things. Isn't it only logical that Accelerator should be smarter and more skeptical than this? Why would he readily accept having a vital part of his ability changed by some organisation that he just joined?
And look at that. A perfect hole. And it took me no time at all.
Okay, next up is contrivances, and the easiest way of describing it is when things happen because they need to happen. It's not because of a chain of cause and effect, it's just that it needs to happen so that the story can move forward. One dead giveaway is when coincidences occur. The most offensive thing that happens in this show constantly is that people just coincidentally run into each other when they need to. So one example is when Accelerator just so happens to see at the beginning of the aftermath of level 6 shift arc. He just so happens to be hopping in his car at the exact right time when Accelerator's looking up in the right direction, and there he is, and the story is set into motion. A second example is when Toma and Index run into Ursula in Italy, in the Queen of the Adriatic Sea arc. This is the entire country of Italy that we're talking about, and they just so happen to run directly into her at the exact right time in the exact right place. Alright, now I'm done talking about what I don't like. I'm going to hand it over to Jeremy Clarkson.
This is brilliant, but I like this. This is brilliant, but I like this. This is brilliant, but I like this.
And yeah, that's pretty much how I feel about it. Now, part of storytelling is about managing expectations. When you get professional reviewers, they're often formally educated and have worked in the industry for a long time. They're all taught what is good. They see themselves as the tastemakers, taught by masters of the craft. They've been mentored by giants in the industry and stand upon their collective shoulders with pride. To them, you and I, we are but unwashed and uncultured swine in their minds. I categorically do not buy into this shit. Fuck this mentality. I've worked in the audio production industry for quite some time. There are certain de facto standards for recording rock and roll performances. For example, everyone knows the Shure SM5 series of microphones sound good for this, as different microphones have different characteristics, obviously. Well, guess what? The real reason they're used so widely by professionals is because, well, they're cheap and they're durable. You can't break them easily. Everyone just got told they sounded good, as all the professional recordists and producers just said so. This wasn't because they sounded good, it's because they didn't want people breaking their shit constantly. And so thus it was, and now it is. The taste was developed and propagated over time for reasons unbeknownst to those who supposedly knew what they were talking about. I call this the Great Circle of Bullshit. The point of my story is that everyone is human, everyone is stupid, and no one knows what they're talking about. This is the world we live in. Now with that out of the way, I'll now go through the reasons why I actually like this show. I take no issue with the straightforward approach of the villains just saying all their plans that I showed earlier. The main reason being is that it's efficient storytelling. If lessons can be learned, or the plot moved along with just a few simple lines of dialogue, so that we can quickly move on to the next story beat, then I'm all for it. At no point did I feel like this show was spinning its wheels or wasting my time as a result of this. Show don't tell is not a rule.
It is more what you call guidelines than actual rules. Hello, Poppy.
Also, whatever happened to the rule of cool? I mean, a lot of this dialogue has almost a Shakespearean, cheesy, theatrical quality to it.
アレイスター、もしかして君は彼らに憧れているんじゃないのか？誰に教えられなくても自身の内から湧く感情に従ってまっすぐに進もうとする者。過去に大きな過ちを犯し、その罪に苦悩しながらも正しい道を進もうとする者。
It's cool and it's badass. You get a grandiose and morally virtuous speech. The villain sees the error of their ways, and it ends with a spectacle of a magical/superpowered battle charged up by some juicy interpersonal and or internal conflict on the back end. Tears are shed, friends make enemies, and enemies make friends. Now I will admit it's all rather basic and unsophisticated, but at the end of the day, it's all good stuff. Not every meal has to be decadent and artistic, like a roast pheasant with a side of truffles, all served with a single plum in a man's hat. It's okay to gorge yourself on Domino's and Big Macs once in a while. I think this show does a really good job of setting your expectations, because right from the very first episode, you know what you should expect. My read was that it was going to be a shonen. The main premise is to set up some big stakes and interpersonal drama that culminates in a huge spectacle. Usually a huge bombastic fight with cool superpowers or something like that. In no way does the storytelling try to punch above its weight in terms of social or ideological commentary either. It's all simple, universal themes like friendship, redemption, and the resistance to the centralization of power. Now with that being said, I wouldn't describe the characters' motivations as realistic for the most part. However, the standard set for them is to be plausible. I think this is a good level to set things at, as it allows for a large degree of flexibility in terms of setting up the main narrative points needed to line up a good fight scene. Rarely does the show step out of bounds and get its head stuck up its own ass, nor does it ever get too confusing. It knows that it's just a completely goofy, derpy anime, and it's completely fine with that. I don't think there's such a thing as a good or bad OP main character. It all depends on what your objectives are and who your audience is. And you shouldn't be so ready to write them off as boring. The only time I think it's done badly is if it's illogical. Gladly, there's a bit of an interesting take on it in this story. In a sense, both Toma and Index are the MacGuffins. This is basically the thing that everyone is fighting over. For example, the One Piece or the Death Note. While not an entirely original concept, it makes things interesting, as they are humans who have strengths and weaknesses at the end of the day. For example, Index always wanders off and is far too naive and optimistic, while Toma is a typical teenage goober who only understands what's right in front of him. He doesn't assess risks sensibly, and often unnecessarily inserts himself into dangerous situations. The point that I'm making is that while these characters are OP, they aren't just defined by the power that they hold. Instead, they're fallible and flawed at the same time as being OP, which makes them interesting compared to otherwise. Just like with the OP main characters, there's no such thing as a good or bad flat character arc. It all just depends on what your objectives are. And it seems Toma's arc has a very clear objective, and that would be for him to be the driving force used to change the other characters and stories around him. He does this in spades. Now this is how you properly do a flat character arc. Look at Accelerator, for example. Knocked him on his ass and made him completely reconsider his outlook on the sisters and on his life in general. Toma pointed out that he's nothing but a little bitch despite all his power, and he can't even use it to save a single person. I like this a lot, because as flawed as Accelerator is, it fed into his massive ego and forced him to consider that he's not top dog at all as a result. If one can only use their power for their own sake, does that truly make one powerful? And so that's what kicks ass about flat character arcs. They provide a baseline for which the other characters to change and evolve around. Almost every story has them. This one is no exception. But hang on, a certain magical index has a soft magic system. Now what does this mean? Basically anyone can pull some bullshit magic out of their ass to fix things. Think Harry Potter style. It's just whatever the story needs sometimes. Sure, you have some levels and whatnot, with more or less talented people, but we're not talking hard numbers here, or limitations like in an RPG where you have like HP, MP, and XP.
I can't give you my strongest potions because my strongest potions are only for the strongest beings and you are of the weakest.
Now with that being said, if you were to objectively look at Harry Potter, would you say it's a bad story overall? I mean, it also has a soft magic system, and thus it's full of plot holes. But no one cares, right? Why do you think this is? Well, I'd say it's because it's not the focus of the story. Harry Potter is not so much about the magic, it's just set dressing. It's an archetypal story about a boy fulfilling a prophecy. Stories are ultimately about sharing human experiences, and if you can share a good one, with plenty of spectacle, and enough of what I call narrative sleight of hand, you can get away with absolute murder. And on this final point, I'm going to attach contrivances onto it too. As long as you're focusing on the important parts of the story, and have other shiny things for the viewer to look at, you can get away with it. And I think this show does a really good job at doing this. Now I know I'm definitely going to have my naysayers in the comments like, the show is mid, or you should expect better from your media. But the thing is, I just don't care. I just like it. Are we allowed to like things? Remember fun? Isn't fun great? Just let me have fun.
That will be cool.
And with that being said, I'll just list a few things that I think the show genuinely does well without having to like prove a point or anything like that.